This is Recruiting Roundtable, where we talk to HR and talent acquisition leaders about thoughtful topics in the world of recruiting. For today's discussion, we're going to be talking about VC talent teams and the impact they have on their portcos. We have an amazing panel this week. Joining us, we have Chris Ahsing, talent partner at Dragonfly. We have Henrrietta Nkrumah, Director of People Ops and Talent at Pachama, and Linda Lee, Talent Partner at AI Fund. Chris, Henrrietta, Linda, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, thanks for having us.
Yep. Great. So before we get started, let's do a quick round of intros. Please just briefly kind of introduce yourself and a little bit about your role and your company, and we'll go from there. Let's go with Henrrietta first.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Henrrietta. I've been in the people and talent acquisition space for a bit. Started off in hospitality. I was in the Middle East working with Qatar Airways, and then pivoted into startup or tech at Airbnb. And now I'm with an amazing climate tech company called Pachama. Nice segue into what we do. So Pachama is a climate tech company that's looking to restore nature through climate change using machine learning, artificial intelligence to ensure that the data capturing and monitoring is as accurate as possible, which is one of the biggest pain points in the climate tech space, to make sure there is accuracy of measurement. Pachama's been around for a little over 5 years now, Series B, steadily growing and making strides towards climate change. So super excited to be here and share my knowledge on all things VC talent teams.
Great. Thank you, Henrrietta. Let's go, Chris.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Chris Ahsing, as mentioned, I work for Dragonfly, a small Web3 venture capital firm, mainly focused on early stage investments. Been about here for about a year, kind of doing all things talent and everything from a VC perspective, from networking, coaching, exec, operations, yada, 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 and that end. Been in about recruiting and talent for 10, I'll say a lot. Won't date myself a little bit there. But worked at small companies, the large ones, the big ones, done some consulting for high frequency trading firms and whatnot. And, just really excited to just have a great discussion about talent. Huge recruiting nerd. I'll end it with that. Really, really big recruiting nerd. So excited to be here.
Well, that's fantastic. We love recruiting nerds. That's why we do the show, actually. And last but not least, Linda.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. So my name is Linda Lee. I work for AI Fund. And as you can tell by the name, we are all about AI. We are actually a mix between a venture studio and a traditional VC. So what that means is we actually build companies from scratch, starting with ideation ourselves, and do the validation. We actually hire the CEO, the board member, and the first 5 members of this new startup that we would fund. And so once we fund them, then we put on our VC hat. Before we fund them, we are builders. We're minor co-founders with the entrepreneurs that we matchmake to the ideas that we have. My background is pretty eclectic. I've been in the HR talent space for a very long time, more years than Chris, I think. And basically, I've been in high tech most of my life. Worked for a lot of VC-backed startups, as well as worked for a couple of unicorns in the past. I've also owned my own businesses, actually in the hospitality as well, own franchises as well as restaurants. So kind of understand that startup journey, as well as not knowing how to make payroll. So valuable lessons and experiences. So yeah, very happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Linda. We have a very eclectic, diverse lineup today. So if you're tuning in, you better tune in. This is going to be a great show. I have a feeling. And I've talked to all these people, so I know that they got a lot to bring to the table. Lastly, my name is Sean Huynh. I'm the host of the show. I'm also the managing director at Rocket. We take a scientific approach to recruiting, where we take, with our team of amazing recruiters, software engineers that we have in-house, in our proprietary AI model that we've trained over the past 7 years. So we've been doing this before AI was like a buzzword, to help our clients source and engage really, really hard to find talent. Okay, so wanted to start taking a macro view. we talked about this all on the pre-show call. Like, it's been a crazy kind of ride the last, call it 3.5, 4 years, especially in tech. From each of your unique kind of perspectives, what are some of the changes you might have noticed in the world of recruiting and talent acquisition over the last couple of years? Let's go back to Henrrietta. Henrrietta, let's kick things off with you.
Yeah, I think like it kind of resonates across board, maybe in terms of the technology that has come into the space, application of artificial intelligence, the different platforms that exist for both the companies or those in talent acquisition, and then even for individuals where it makes recruiting super easy, their ability to even apply to numerous positions at once, review their resumes and make it more tailored towards the particular role and position. And then also in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion with remote work, right? It's opened up a lot of access to talent that probably it would be difficult to hire when we were all in the office or roles were restricted to a certain location. So I've seen that kind of pivot where companies have increased their diversity, whether intentionally or unintentionally, because of remote work and its offerings. So I would say like those are the two main things that really stick out in terms of changes over the last couple of months, weeks, years in the talent acquisition space for me.
I'm gonna put a point on rage applying. I'm gonna ask everyone about that later because I've seen it. I've seen people talk about it. They like people on TikTok saying they applied like 1,000 jobs in a second with the click of a button, and I'm interested in everyone's take on that. We'll put a pin in it. Chris, what are some things you've seen over the last couple of years?
Last couple of years, I think, a little bit of what Henrrietta was saying in terms of AI, but more so automation. I think tooling, automation, kind of more the application AI, I think is what's been really kind of interesting. I've seen a lot more analytics tools pop up, Ashby, Gem, they're offering more reporting. Teams are getting a little bit more data-driven, or it's becoming easier to be more data-driven in terms of recruiting teams. And, I think elephant in the room, right? It's been a very turbulent market in a lot of ways. So teams running lean, having to run lean, and a lot of the changes that come with recruiting philosophy, hiring structure, strategy with the current market today, which we could probably dive into a ton, but just like you said, I'll put a pin in that one as well. But that's, I think for me, what has been the most kind of like, at least what I've been dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, seems like everyone's being asked to do more with less, not just in recruiting, across the board. Linda, what about yourself? A lot of people mentioned AI, and I know this is kind of your wheelhouse. I'm assuming you might talk about it, but what else have you seen, or if it's AI related, please share what have you been seeing.
So I would say right now it's sort of changing of the guards in a way, meaning since technology is no longer a true defensible moat, it's no longer a barrier that's difficult to cross. Of course, hiring great AI machine learning talent is still super difficult, but you don't need as many of them anymore, right? So I agree with Chris, companies are running more lean because they can automate and do a lot more things with less people. And so therefore, with this changing of the guards of, kind of out with the old way of doing things and in with the new way of doing things. And with that, what will differentiate for the talent person is really understanding the business and how to identify people who can help with go-to-market strategy and product market fit, rather than a lot of the hard skills that you needed to assess in the past. So a lot more like, do you understand the business? Do you understand trends? Do you understand, what kind of soft skills you have? And also how logical you are. So because, with prompt engineering, it's all about how you ask the question and not, and not like, can you code it anymore? So I think that's pretty, that's going to be more and more prominent. So I think we're going to go through this rough period of changing of the guards where there's going to be some people not willing to let go and some people going, well, you need to because we're coming in. So
yeah. So I'm going to go off the script. I just thought of this question, and I will stick with you, Linda, because I think you have the most years of experience in kind of this realm, in this domain. Art versus science recruiting. Do you think recruiting is more artistic or more of an art or science? And do you think it's changed in the past few? Because I'm hearing a lot of data driven. I'm hearing a lot of process. I'm hearing a lot of AI. What are your thoughts on recruiting, art or science, and has it changed in the last couple of years?
So I think it's going to depend on what kind of people you're going after. I think if you're hiring executive level folks, okay, it's still about network and who you know and getting referrals. But when it comes to maybe some of the more some of the positions where that hard skill set or that very strong soft skill set isn't as needed or isn't as important, then I think it's more volume, right? Yeah. It's like just getting stuff done. So I would say it is more of a balance, and also depending on the level of positions you're trying to fill. Yeah.
That's a great point on the executive piece. Chris, I see you smiling. You're next.
No, I was just agreeing. I was shaking my head in agreement. I love this question because every time I get asked it, it's like I totally skirt around the answer of just like it's right in the middle, right? Like there's a bit of science to it. There's some optimization and correlating things with like sales funnels and marketing funnels, and that you can kind of take a look at. But the hard fact is that you're dealing with people. It's not as I don't want to say easier, but it's not as easy as like sales in the sense that it's very transactional. Like you're asking somebody to uproot almost a really big part of their life, and dealing with people in an emotional decision making is so hard. And so it's like, when Linda was saying it's kind of like depends, it's like, yeah, very much my same answer. It's like right in the middle, I think, in a lot of ways. So
okay,
we'll see where AI takes us, right? Like how much
we'll see
humans out of meeting people and whatnot. So
I don't think you can take humans out of it. It's a people business. We need humans. We need humans. Henrrietta, what are your thoughts on this? Art or science?
Yeah, I think definitely agree with the panel. It is just as Chris said, right in the middle. It depends on the role. It even depends on the hiring manager and what they're looking for, and working with them and partnering with them. I think for me, recruiting is always, I see it as being a business partner, not like a service provider where you're trying to fill roles, but actually being able to leverage your experience, your knowledge, the data that you see, and applying that and creating a very effective and candidate experience friendly process. And so it would definitely vary, as Linda mentioned, if you're looking for an executive role, or if is it like entry level, mid. Some positions are just pretty much down to the science, what you're looking for, and then others, it's a mix. So I agree.
It's really interesting. You mentioned this candidate experience, and this is episode 11 of the show, so candidate experience pretty much comes up every show. And we were having a show a couple months ago, and one of the guests was speaking about how, because we talk candidate experience, you think that's more of like a human function, but they were talking about how they leverage like automation to improve the candidate experience to ensure that candidates don't get ghosted. Right, because humans sometimes like they have so much going on, but a machine can make sure you can like respond to a candidate, let them know like updates and stuff, right? So I think a mix of technology and process and people all together can really increase the candidate experience. So I tend to agree with the panel. It's a little bit of a mix of art and science. I want to kind of pivot to like our topic for today, which is VC talent teams, and talk about the role that VC talent partners and VCs play with their portcos. So we have great perspectives. We have two folks who work for VCs, and then we have one who works in-house. So I'd love to kind of get those alternate perspectives. Let's start with Linda. Linda, tell me a little bit how your role. I mean, I know that you're involved in hiring, probably like the CEO and then the first 5 hires, but how involved do you get into that process, and what are some of the pieces and things that you bring to the table?
So So my role is slightly different. I do have a team that will do all of the end-to-end recruiting for me. So what I focus on is more the strategic aspect. So for example, I build up a community of entrepreneurs that are in transition. So these are all either tech co-founders or CEO type of folks, or folks that want to just advise. And so these are folks in transition, or they're looking for their next idea, or they have an idea and they're looking for their counterpart. So I built up this community from scratch about 18 months ago. And it's been great because it's feeding us a lot of information and feeding us a lot of candidates and ideas as well. And so I focus a lot of my time on that. I focus a lot of my time on engagement with our portfolio companies. And I advise them a lot on compensation, especially like, try to convince somebody who's never heard of this company before, that has no traction, no product, no nothing, right? All they have is a dream, can be kind of a tough job. And so we need to actually really hone our sales and marketing skills in order to, number one, get the name out there, get the brand out there so that they trust in AI Fund's brand and our backing of these CEOs and ideas. So a lot of that is marketing. And then the other is on the sales part, really appealing to their these entrepreneurs' hopes and dream of moving humanity forward using AI. And so I think those are some of the things that I focus on personally. And that's why I also manage marketing at the fund as well. So, yeah.
It sounds like a crazy proposition, joining a company that has no traction, no product, and just like a slide deck or something, right? But it takes a special type of person to do it. And, if you find the right people, they can make a huge difference. Chris, let's juxtapose kind of, Linda has her type of role. How do you kind of run your operation at Dragonfly?
Yeah. I think for us, the mission is we want to help our portfolio companies grow, right? We really do. And we want them to be successful at the end of the day. And the I guess mission, or kind of the idea that we have, is like we want to build teams that build teams. And we try to take both a macro and micro kind of approach to it, just because we have 150 portfolio companies. There's 2 of us, not a lot of us to go around in that way. So we try to segment a bit of our effort. And what I mean by this is, on the macro, build a really robust talent network with warm introductions to teams that are hiring. And we don't get involved in the like granular day-to-day recruiting unless it's like really high priority. It's a big need, something's on fire, but because of bandwidth, we just don't have the opportunity to do that. That's the macro end. And then the micro end is a lot of the coaching aspect of it, right? It's as Linda was saying, right? Like, how do you close someone? How do you help advise? We do a lot of advising on compensation ourselves, especially in the Web3 space. There's not a lot of data, so we spend a lot of time doing a lot of research there. How do we teach them how to, fish for themselves, for lack of better analogy, right? How do you source? How do you talk to candidates? How do you screen? And one thing that's been really exciting for us is moving in the direction of, helping them set up their systems internally for recruiting, because founders just don't have time in a lot of ways in early stage to do these things. So a bit of a macro, micro view, macro being talent networking, exec introductions, micro being a lot more of the coaching, one-on-one support, help, and advising, and sprinkle in as much as research and content as we can through that.
Interesting. And Henrrietta, so being kind of in-house, you work with VC talent partners. How was that experience? Like, have you had certain VC talent partners have given you like great value, or you've had a really great experience that you could potentially share with the group?
Yeah, I mean, to Chris's point, a lot of the work is done prior to even somebody specializing in recruiting or talent acquisition will step into the companies. So you'll see a lot of the work done in terms of coaching founders on their initial recruiting process, giving them tips, definitely in terms of referrals. My interaction has been more so around obviously entering in a startup phase, seed stage, Series A. We're now putting those building blocks into play and formulating. It could be a temporary structure because post Series A, Series B, that could pivot into something bigger, obviously bigger budget. So we're working with what we have. The support that I've received from VC talent partners has been just in terms of referring, helping build out those initial key hires that are going to be strategic in the building blocks. And then as we continue to scale and grow, we build a reputation. The company is more known out there. You're getting a lot of inbound. It makes the recruiting process a lot more easy because, again, we're doing more with less. You have a smaller recruiting team. You can't pretty much do everything, which is what we do in a startup. You're a talent partner, people operations, you're doing everything payroll. So you can get all the help you can get. And so working with them in terms of job boards that they have, that they can actually push some of these positions out there to create awareness, and leveraging them in that way. Because a lot of times, like what Chris said, there are not a lot of them. So they can't really be in-house. Is it like with regards to recruiting agencies that have really been effective in the past, or for some of their other portfolio companies that we can partner or work with in the interim as we continue to scale and build out the team? Those are some of the ways in which I partner with the VC talent teams.
Wow, it sounds like there's a lot of value there. Like there's the job boards, there's referrals, there's referrals to candidates, and also referrals to like service partners, like agencies. So that's really interesting. I wanted to stay with you, Henrrietta, on this topic for a sec, because I think Chris and Linda might be interested to hear this. So you might be working with multiple VCs, there might be multiple talent partners. There's people internally, there's your leadership team, there's yourself. So there's a lot of data coming and like information coming from all these different places. How do people gain that trust and credibility that you're actually going to take their advice? I think that's kind of what I'm going to ask, right? Like how do you decipher and distill all this information you're getting and then actually action on it?
I definitely value the advice of the VC talent partners. Definitely leveraging tools as well. Like some applicant tracking systems have really great tagging mechanisms in which we can track where these applicants are coming from and which portals are more successful, and how we can index on those portals and focus a little bit more there. I also want to make sure that I utilize the help that I have as effective as possible. And so, as much as I get a lot of inbound in terms of list of potential great applicants from their pool that are sourced from VC talent partners, I also want to make sure that I'm leveraging the right ones for some of the key positions or hard to fill roles, and having those touch points. How can I get additional support? How can I leverage them more? Because sometimes when you're in-house, there's this need to want to like prove yourself and like, I want to fill it. I want to do it by myself. Yeah. I always tell my recruiters, always like this letting go of your Legos analogy, where they're there to help, they're there to push for the same mission. So it's okay to raise your hand and say, hey, I need help. Hey, I want to pick your brain. How do I look at this differently? What are some of the resources that you have that I don't know of or that I can use to help make it more efficient? And that's kind of the way that I approach it. So as much as I want to be able to get as much help as I need, I want to be also tactful in how I utilize the talent partners. So whether it's with regards to, again, resources in terms of agencies, whether it's like they're really key in a particular area when it comes to an executive role that we're looking to fill, how they can help me kind of network and get great talent in the door. I want to be strategic around that in utilizing their help.
You sound like a great partner. So Linda, we talked about this on our pre-show, and I'm going to ask you this question now. So since like VC talent partners aren't truly a part of that company, how do you like, how do you take on a more strategic role within that relationship and with that company? And
Yeah.
your portfolio, with your portfolio companies, when there's multiples, right? I'm not sure how many companies are in the AI fund portfolio.
About 40.
40. Okay, that's right. So I wrote this down. So you have close to 40. Chris has 150. So there's the question: how do you take on a more strategic role with 40 companies?
Well, you kind of need to know each CEO and where their gaps are. So that's number one. Because then you're able to, either help them find people to help them shore up those gaps, or you yourself may need to do more to shore up those gaps. And so I think so then the second thing is really proving your value, by providing a lot of data, providing a lot of anecdote information as well, because people like storytelling. And I think the other is every time you talk to them, you got to think about, if I were them, why would they want to talk to me? And really just like think about what kind of value you can bring to them versus having this conversation be about what you and your fund is looking for. It's got to be like, how can I be helpful? That's always, I think I end almost every call with, how can I be helpful? And so it's amazing, like the ones that will ask and open up, they're the companies that will go much further because they know they can't do it alone. So I'm not sure if I answered your question about being strategic, but I think first you gotta know who they are, their gaps, and understand how you can bring value to them by shoring up those gaps. So it's not a straight answer, I guess.
I think it's what I'm learning from the last two responses. It's a two-way street, right? Like you have to bring value, but the person then has to want to receive that value and be open to it, right? If you have an attitude like Henrrietta, where you want to be a true partner and you're trying not to be selfish about kind of who gets the credit, then you could be successful. But I think if you're not open to it, to help, it's not gonna fly. Chris, 150 portcos. It's a lot of portcos, man. How do you be more strategic with a large portfolio?
It's a lot of work. I mean, there's no a great answer to here. I think, especially for Dragonfly as a firm, really have prided ourselves in just being available to founders, pretty much almost 24/7 in a way. And great in just building relationships, reputation. And I think, just to give a more direct answer from the talent side, it all kind of falls into what both Henrrietta and Linda had been saying. We want to be helpful, but at the same time, like Henrrietta was saying, like there's so much coming at you. There's so many different talent partners from different VCs, agencies, managers, hiring managers. We also don't want to be a hindrance. Like we want to be available. We want to be helpful. We want to add value. We want to be useful in those ways, but we also don't that. And so it's really reactive at this point, with a few proactive channels that we're consistently talking to founders in that end. I think sometimes and might call out the industry itself a little bit here. So we forget, we move a little bit too fast and not slow down and listen to what the person on the other end is asking for, like need. Sometimes we're just kind of constantly shoving data down their throats, or some type of philosophy, or you need to do this, you need to do that. Just like slowing down and actually working through a problem with a founder or a partner, a recruiter, a founder, whatever it may be. And that might take over some time, and having that opportunity to actually have that relationship and discussion and actually deliver at the end of it, right? Like that's the thing that my colleague Zach and I are really, the head of talent, Zach and I, are really good about, is like every time we have a meeting with a founder, a team member, we're scheduling next steps. Like it's always like a good follow-up and outcome in that end. So to summarize, it's really a lot of work. It's being available, it's listening and trying to be helpful and not a hindrance. And then, like Linda said, adding value, like you're delivering, like you have to show up and what you say you do and kind of thing. So no real answer other than just work. So
just got to put the work in. It's so funny you mentioned listening. I had one client who really loved, it was an agency I was running before. I asked him, why do you love us so much? And he says, because you listen. I was like, really? Nobody else listens to you? He's like, you guys listen to me and you actually action on the things I asked you for. And I'm like, wow. I mean, thank you, I guess. So let's talk a little bit about, we're going into like a little bit of a budget sensitive environment. And we've been in this kind of budget sensitive environment for over a year now, maybe a year and a half. Have there been certain things in terms of like strategies, whether it's, I don't know, like how you allocate spend in towards agencies or software or towards, hiring, that you've had to make over the last, call it 18 months because of this kind of economic climate we're in? Let's start with Henrrietta. Have you seen any of this at Pachama, or have you been asked to kind of, reevaluate your budget and kind of rebalance things a little bit?
I mean, it's a startup, right? So you're always trying to do a whole lot with as little as possible. I think for me, not just looking at the budget, but also about the team's capacity, being a very small team, 2-person people and talent team. Tools and automation is super important to make us more efficient. If we're in the weeds doing very administrative tasks that a tool can do, it's not making us productive. And so I think we're always evaluating. I think some of the major pain points is just around transitioning from one tool to another, the work that's needed in terms of rolling it out, training team members. And so how can we maximize the existing tools? And if, what we have that's not working pretty well for us, if we want to pivot, we have to do it and do it thoughtfully. So I would say that in this stage, even probably in big tech as well, you're always evaluating, reevaluating, making sure that what you have is doing the most and the best. And as we said earlier on with the launch of AI and additional tools, I mean, the list goes on, it's endless. Sometimes, companies or people just want to jump on the next big thing and not evaluating tools for their existing size and space and what works best for them, or just adding on to something because that's what everyone's doing, and kind of just elongates processes internally. So for me, I want to be efficient. I want to be thoughtful about how we do it, and most importantly, maximize the team size that we have, and in making sure that the experience is great for stakeholders as well as candidates. I mean, we've all been candidates. As the team has mentioned, it's humans that we're dealing with. We want to make sure that we're doing the best that we possibly can to offer great experiences.
Great. And just quickly, is there one tool that, is just indispensable in your toolkit that you could share with the group that you just like, maybe you got introduced, or maybe it's been there from the beginning that you just couldn't live without?
Do we name names? This is free marketing.
Name names. One software tool that you just can't live without. I'd love to hear.
I would say probably like a really good ATS. It depends on the size of the company. I've had like pretty functional ones that did a whole lot. So it would depend on the size. I've had like a really good ATS and a good performance management and employee engagement tool that works pretty well. I know like 15.5 is great from a budget perspective if some of the other bigger tools don't really work. And then from an applicant tracking perspective, I'm a sucker for Greenhouse.
Okay, there you go. All right, so let's talk about the budget question. Let's go, Linda. You're next up.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that we do. Let me talk about the tools first. So what we do is we try to identify vendors that offer a great tool or service at a discounted price. So I normally go out and try to negotiate for better pricing for all of our portfolio companies. So the two tools that we have found very valuable in the recruiting space, I hate to say it because they have a monopoly, is LinkedIn. So I do have Yeah, I do have a global enterprise. I am part of their enterprise global program, which allows us to have a lot of flexibility in terms of job slots and recruiting seats.
Great.
Now, we also use Crunchbase a lot
Mhm.
because of the nature of the type of people that we look for. We're always looking at specific domain experts, people who have founded companies before. So I would say those are the two tools that we utilize quite frequently. I like Greenhouse as well. We do currently use Lever because Lever also has, you're able to utilize multiple domains, or Lever is willing to allow you to have multiple domains. So we do actually have a lot of our portfolio companies using Lever because it's the same account. So again, another cost savings for them. The other thing that we do on the compensation side is, and I don't know if either Chris or Henrrietta have done this, I imagine, you may have, is we actually give folks, not the CEO, but the rest of the folks, like 3 options. So high equity, low salary, high salary, low equity, and then something in the middle. And sometimes, you never really know if you made the right, or you never really know what kind of value, right, the person's going to be able to bring. So sometimes we also put in like an additional incentive if you meet certain KPIs 2-3 years down the line. Then we'll, like kind of promise you a refresh in a way on the equity side. Because, you try to conserve as much cash as you can, but it doesn't mean you have a big employee pool either. So you do different things to try to make sure that you're being fair and pay people well, but not so well that your budget ends up suffering.
I've seen a number of companies do that, a bunch of startups where they have different options. I think it's a effective strategy for some starts. I am kind of concerned though; it's like almost like a trap to the candidate, because the candidate's like, "Oh, if I take the high salary, is that they're gonna think differently of me?" So I don't know. Do you ever get that feedback where candidates a little bit kind of nervous about which one they should take because of the optics?
No, I haven't seen that. It gives us a lot of really good information in terms of, their priorities. And also everybody's situation is different, right? If you're single, you got, you feed yourself, you fed the whole family, great, no mortgage or whatever. But if you got a couple of kids going to college and you're the kind of parent who's going to pay for it, then yeah, base salary is kind of important. So, and if you happen to live in the Bay Area, there's just like a minimum.
It's expensive to live there.
Salary is very different compared to some other states. Yeah,
of course.
So no judgment whatsoever.
Okay, that's great. So we're gonna wrap this up. It's the same question with Chris. We're getting short on time. So Chris, you're last up on the budget question. It's turned into a tooling and budget question. So I guess I gotta ask, any tools that you really love that you want to share as recommendations, and then of course, how do you kind of help your portcos kind of make the most of their budget?
Yeah, I'll kind of do in the same flow. I'll start with the second question on budget, and then kind of work toward tooling. Philosophically, we stand in like, look, cut spend, not people first, right? That's the main one, right? What we advise, like, hey, and how do you approach that as OpEx? Like, where are you leaking money? Where can you save? And this is where a lot of, like Linda, a lot of the negotiating power on legal recruiting, AWS credits that Dragonfly tries to offer as much as we possibly can, discounts on agencies, pave data, compensation, whatnot. So that's where we really focus on. And then the third thing is like hire good people, right? Bad hires cost money. Bad searches cost money. And so really trying to kind of come back full circle around coaching and installing the right mechanisms for people to grow their teams effectively. In terms of a tool that I love, Gem, I'm a big Gem fan. It's been really beneficial for us because they're free for a lot of early stage startups, and it allows us to teach them how to source, how to do some of the automation and engagement kind of thing. But also we're a design partner for Gem's ATS. So for teams that are really small, it's really free. It's kind of taking, all of the UX and UI problems of a founder trying to set up an ATS and scaling it. That's the approach. So recycle, right? Cut spend, not people before that. Try to get OpEx expenses down as much as you can, become efficient in recruiting and hiring. And then we try to offer as many discounts as we can on tooling. So hopefully that was a quick answer.
That was great. We're out of time, but Henrrietta, Linda, Chris, this was an amazing episode. I appreciate all of you for taking the time, joining. There's some amazing insights. Thank you so much. And so again, we had a great panel today. Thank you, Henrrietta, Linda, and Chris for joining. Until next time, happy hunting.